Hey everyone, welcome back to Santa Cruz County's hottest live stream of Google Slides, transmitting again from Middlesex County, Massachusetts, but still Santa Cruz at heart. And may I be so bold as to claim possibly the best live stream of Google Slides that even is anywhere in between Santa Cruz County and here in Massachusetts. I could be the only one. There's no community for people like us. Well, I aim to help you get your fix of sweet Google Slides, and I do aim, in the course of doing so, to teach you a little bit about this week again, just one of the worst miracles that there is. And that means we're going to have to make a new friend. We're going to meet somebody new this week. We have, up to this point, largely been focusing on those desert daddies, right? Those people who do miracle work out in the wilderness, in a rural or desert milieu environment, far away from the prying eyes of concerned citizens like you or I. But miracles happen in cities too, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Talking about a guy named Simon the Fool, who is a very urban character. He does most of his miracle business at a place called Emesa, that's Homs in modern Syria. It's called Simeon the Fool, not because he's some kind of an idiot. Allegedly, anyway, he just fakes being crazy for Jesus. Like you do. So that when he does something like just shitting in the street, like you do, that's somehow holy and not a guy being dumb or crazy. Well, if you've been watching these videos all the way through, then this idea of somebody shitting in the street to make a point might ring a bell. It has been said, I think correctly, that Simeon the Fool is imitating Diogenes a little bit. Diogenes the cynic, the guy who lives in a barrel and does all of his business out of doors, who I talked about a couple of months ago on this broadcast. Diogenes is somebody who is actually, incidentally, a big deal for late antique Christianity. He's somebody that all sorts of Christian writers kind of take as an example, and some Christian historical figures, saints like Simeon, also take Diogenes as a model. The holy fool, like the holy cynic, is acting crazy in order to make a theological point, and we'll talk about what that might be today, but also in coming weeks when we talk more about this guy. Well, there's one callback to earlier in this series. Another callback is that the dude is from Edessa. That is the city from which Simeon the Holy Fool hails. He is from Edessa. Orhai, the city which we talked about in connection with Bardaisan. A city which produced quite a flowering of philosophical and Christian culture in late antiquity. At a slightly earlier period, Simeon is coming at the tail end of it, but by the time that his life is being written down by a guy named Leontius, who lives in the 7th century and who lives on Cyprus, by that time, by the time that Simeon's life is being recorded, Edessa is no longer a Christian city. At this point in history, actually, the expansion of Islam is pushing the Byzantine world to the point of collapse. Already, the Sasanian Empire has basically crumbled, or I think more accurately been taken over by Islamic rulers. And the center of gravity of the Islamic world is really going to shift in that direction in the 8th century. But that empire, which I talked about in the video about the Kaaba of Zoroaster, has been Islamized, become part of this political unit which consists of Arabia and now also Iran and North Africa. The Byzantine Empire loses a really serious battle in about 636, the Battle of Yarmouk, and from that point forward cannot really defend much of its territory from conquest by the Caliphate. And this leads to a kind of internal collapse in the Byzantine worlds, a period of referred to as a Dark Age, which will last for quite a while. And Simeon lives before this period of time, but his story becomes interesting to Leontius, to his audience. It's a really popular life as a holy man, precisely when the Byzantine world is getting conquered. You can see in this chart actually already Cyprus is occupied by the Caliphate. Leontius writes this story just before that happens. Well, so what this tells us is that Simeon the Fool is a crazy man for a crazy time. And here's one of his craziest deeds. Simeon's extremely powerful death prayer, which goes like this. The story is one that we're probably all familiar with. I mean, you are all college students. Normally that would involve moving away from home. Doesn't so much anymore. Moving away from home, right, I mean, involves a certain amount of guilt and nostalgia, right? You worry about how your poor parents are doing. You kind of miss them. You want to go back sometimes. You know, maybe you like being at school, but you wish you could go back. Sometimes you wish you'd never left. And believe me, even the best of us do have these feelings. Simeon the Fool definitely did when he didn't go to college, but rather went off into the desert for a period of time before he moved to Emesa. He retreated to the desert to do the holy man thing there, some holy man internship. And he felt really bad about doing that. He felt bad about abandoning his mother. He missed his mother terribly. So this is a problem for him. It's a temptation for him to abandon his commitment to God and go back home and just, be with his folks. And his friend, his bud, was in a similar situation. Every fool needs a bud, and Simeon's bud is John of Alexandria. Another holy dude, not a holy fool, but just a guy who lives in the desert. And for this period, when they're in the desert, they do everything together, including running off for the desert in the first place. Now, where Simeon's got a mother, John's got a wife, and we could talk about the psychology of that all day, but it's kind of beside the point of this talk. Well, so John's got a wife. Anyhow, he used to. It's kind of an ex-wife now, since John ran off to the desert with Simeon the mad fool. And John of Alexandria is sorely vexed with a combination of guilt and desire. He misses his wife, his sort of ex-wife. And he feels bad for abandoning her, putting her in quite a bad situation, quite a bad position, because a woman who has been dropped by her husband, unless she is quite wealthy, is very socially vulnerable in late antiquity, as in most periods in the ancient world. Well, so they're in this position. They're in the desert, and the devil keeps reminding them about their mother, their wife. The devil is sitting on their shoulder and being like, hey, shouldn't you be nicer to your mom? And didn't you marry that woman? And this is a severe temptation. So a weird way for us to think about it, but Leontius is not the only ancient author who represents it that way. Well, this goes on for a while. They're sort of tormented by guilt and nostalgia, but then Simeon's mom dies. He finds out about this instantly because of his magic holy man powers, and he sees that she is in heaven, resting in the bosom of the Lord, didn't go to hell or anything. So this is a huge relief for Simeon. He no longer has to feel guilt. He no longer has to feel this temptation to return to worldly life to take care of his mother. Well, John sees this, and he's like, "Oh, Simeon, you seem so happy. Take my wife, please." Now, Simeon then prays hella hard, and he succeeds in zapping John of Alexandria's wife, just killing her remotely with prayer. It's a miracle. Well, she goes to heaven too, so it's all right. John's wife and Simeon's mother get to hang out in heaven. Don't worry about how Simeon killed this poor woman by praying at her. That's the miracle. Anyway, the moral of this horrible little story. Dudes are obviously trash. This is as true in antiquity as it is now. Actually, a good deal more true in antiquity. The woman characters in this story, which very clearly fails the Bechdel test. In fact, probably, can you get less than a 0 on it? I feel like there should be some kind of a negative score on the Bechdel test, in which case this story would definitely get it. The woman characters in this story are merely incidental, merely obstacles to the holiness of the men. And this is also going to be a theme in some of the other miracle stories that we look at. Women do get a bad time of it, but this is almost kind of the background ideology of monastic life in early Christianity. It's this very kind of homosocial, men hanging out together kind of thing, which if women want to join, they have to kind of desexualize in a way, become more like men. It's a men's club, and the feminine is seen very much as being kind of a danger to it. Sometimes a danger that you fix by miracles that just kill women. Well, there's that, but there's something else almost more literary than dogmatic here. It's just that this is a story about how you can't go home again. You can't, once you've made this commitment to live in the desert and hang with Jesus and have this kind of a holy life, you can't go home again. Even when you do go back to a city, it's not the city you left, it's Emesa, not Edessa. The people you knew are not there, and you yourself are a transformed person. You're not an upright member of society, you're a hobo-looking crazy guy who shits in the street for Jesus. So you can't go home again. It's a temptation. You want to. You got this feeling of nostalgia and guilt. And the miracle that Simeon brings about is God taking away your need to go home again, destroying your home by killing your family members so that you don't have to feel this sense of connection to it. God is obliterating your nostalgia in a way that seems quite cruel to us, but to Leontius, right, the person who's writing this story in the mid-7th century CE, after so much of what had been the Byzantine world is no longer under Byzantine control. Well, maybe this story seems a little more poignant, right? Because Leontius is living in a world that's full of refugees, people coming from places like Alexandria, places like Edessa, these formerly Byzantine cities, places where John of Alexandria and Simeon the Holy Fool were from. Both these cities are captured by the caliphal armies, and people are getting displaced. Well, not everyone. Your landowners, your ordinary people probably wouldn't even really notice the change of rule. In fact, in many respects, they would have appreciated the public-mindedness, the public investments, the egalitarianism, potentially, of Islam by contrast with the very oppressive and autocratic forms of Byzantine rule that had preceded it. People are fine. But if your identity is really centrally crafted around being Christian, if you're one of these holy men, then yeah, you might end up going into exile, going into a place where your religion is the dominant one, and you can sort of bank on this identity as a Christian holy man that you've built your whole life. And there are a bunch of these refugees. A bunch of them are washing up on Cyprus, actually. It's kind of a midpoint before it's captured by the Caliphate. It's a place where people go from North Africa, from the Levant, to be in a Christian part of the Byzantine world. And these people are doing by necessity what Simeon did by choice, that is, leaving their homes. So the story that Leontius tells about Simeon, the story of his murder prayer, is that basically, well, you can do it too. You can leave home. Simeon did it. You can do it too. Displacement, it means you lose what you left behind, but it also means you can make this kind of new life with Jesus somewhere else. Maybe you too can be a crazy person who publicly defecates for the Lord. Well, if we ever get back to attending college, etc., and meeting in person and leaving the house, and you do end up having to move away from home again, this solution is not one that you should be pursuing. But rather, just call your parents from time to time. You never know when something might happen to them. You'll be glad you did later on. Well, that's the wholesome moral of this episode. I will catch you all next time with another horrible miracle. Good night.